You're listening to the Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent C optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues in the mainframe and how BMC AMI solutions can help you make change your competitive advantage. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Mainframe. I'm Matt Delaire. Today's episode is a discussion of the role of metrics in DevOps, the importance of collecting this data, the value it provides, and what to measure to truly gauge your performance. Joining me today are BMC Lead Product Manager Spencer Hallman and DevOps Evangelist Atul Bhovan and Tony Anter. So, gentlemen, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
So we'll jump right into it. When discussing DevOps, one of the concepts we hear about is the idea of continuous learning and continuous improvement across organizations and teams. So how do metrics and KPIs help drive this continuous improvement? Tony, I'll ask you to start.
So I think metrics drive this. They give you the measurements and they give you the pathway so that you know where your bottlenecks are at and where what's efficient, what's not efficient in any of your environments. The mainframe, the same as any other environment that you're trying to measure, right? If you can't measure it, then you don't know whether you're improving or not improving or what it is. My old boss, Rick, at a previous employer, he told me that if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. So you have to be able to measure things so that you know where you stand. Otherwise, to be frank, you're sort of shooting in the dark.
Right. Spencer, I'll ask you about the Icelandic baseball team. That might be a good analogy here.
Yeah, so when we started on our journey with the advisor, there was this analogy made about the Icelandic baseball team that all they would do is practice all day and all week because there was no other baseball teams in Iceland. And so, they would practice, but they never knew what they needed to improve because there was no, statistics that they could capture for themselves, or they wouldn't know how they performed in a game. So when you get into the game that, you start calculating your earned run average or your batting average or your on base percentage and all those, what they call sabermetrics statistics that are used so popular today. So without capturing the statistics, especially in mainframe development, how do you know what to improve or where to improve or where the bottlenecks are?
Right. So what are some DevOps metrics and what are their characteristics? Atul, I'll ask you to start.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I think they've got to be aligned to your business goals. One of the things that we often do with our customers is to run discovery workshops where we try to understand their priorities and what their goals are. Make sure that we put together metrics which support those. And they've got to be obviously measurable. They've got to be relevant to those goals that they've set going forward. And also reliable. By that, what I mean is some organizations are concerned that these metrics can be gamified. And there's two ways of looking at that. I know that Tony has one opinion of these in his experience, but what I've come across is that quite often some teams can gamify these metrics to make them look good. And if there's internal competition within teams, obviously the human spirit is we want to win. So they will try to make these metrics look much more in their favor than other people's favors. So Tony, what's your take on the gamification side of things?
I've never personally seen it in the industry, but I could see where, depending on how a team is incented or how they're rewarded for the improvement, I could see how it could possibly be there. But I think that having that standard set of metrics and that standard measurement across everyone and everything, to me, it makes a lot of sense having that standardization. Even if someone's gaming it a little bit, at least they're in a position to game it, right? At least they're in a position to be able to measure it and game it and show some kind of improvement. I think when we talk about this, one of the measures I like to look at are the DORA metrics. DORA is an industry standard that a lot of companies use for measurement, and they really boil it down to 4 basic KPIs: deployment frequency, lead time to change, mean time to recovery, and change failure rate. And these weren't just sort of pulled out of a hat somewhere. There was about 100 plus companies got together and looked at what were the key KPIs that they would want to measure for DevOps across the board, and this is what they came up with. So I think as teams are looking at measuring things and how they measure, I think these are four of the keys that you can use at a minimum. Then to Atul's point, go to your business and find out what do they want to see? What's key to them? Because that could be a little different organization to organization, team to team, business vertical to business vertical, right?
Very true.
And I think some of those KPIs can't be gamified, right? I think one of them is deployment failure rate. If you have a failure in production and you have to do a fallback, I don't know any way you would gamify that, as opposed, unless you're just going to leave, your failed code in production and continue to refer the errors. There was a guy, Gary Groover, he wrote a book called Leading the Transformation, and he was kind of reading material for us a couple of years ago. And he came into BMC CompuWare and he gave us a kind of a master class, as it was put. And he said, when you're looking at the KPIs, pick KPIs that you can't gamify. And I think, Tony, as you pointed out, those 4 DORA metrics are a good base.
Also, I think it's worth pointing out that the metrics we work with, they've got to be actionable. And we learn about what the metric is telling us, but we can't take a follow-up action to improve things. So that part is very important. And then traceability. If it's showing us that something has gone wrong, we need to understand what's gone wrong and what can we do to improve on that next time around. So it's all about continuous improvement at the end of the day, really.
I think Atul brings up a really good point there too, because it's about what you can action. I would rather measure 2 or 3 of the right metrics than 100 metrics that I can't really do anything with or that don't add any value. And I think one of the mistakes I see a lot with people in the industry is they try to measure everything. They try to pull in as much data as possible, and then they have to parse through it and pull it apart versus identifying what are those key KPIs that you want and then doubling down on measuring those actionable things that you can so that you can see improvement, build efficiencies, and mature your DevOps offering.
And you probably need to set a baseline, get basic numbers going first. I mean, you're not going, the first batch of data you collect isn't probably going to tell you that much until you can figure out where you are, and then if you're improving, getting faster, slowing down, etc. Right?
Yes, very much so, I think. So we have to take the benchmark to understand the current state. And I think it's also important with that to set goals as well over time. So many organizations will be looking to set goals for, say, 3 months from now, 6 months, 12 months. And those goals are aspirations. They want to reach that state, and they will do everything they can to reach that state. But the fact that they have metrics in place means they can measure that they're improving. And if they're not, obviously, this is a guidance for them to say, okay, we need to change our tack slightly. Maybe we need further training. We need to optimize some of the tooling, things like that. So that feedback loop is the most important thing. These metrics are not for vanity. They're to give us the honest picture so we can make real life decisions.
So BMC published an ebook called Charting Your Mainframe DevOps KPIs for Continuous Improvement. And it outlines KPI objectives for mainframe DevOps. So I'll include a link to the ebook in the show notes, but I'd like to go through each of these objectives and talk about some examples of metrics that can help them be reached. The first one listed is increased development quality. Why is that important, and what metric can be used to gauge that? Spencer, I'll ask you to start.
Yeah, sure. One of the metrics that we use to gauge it was the advisors, the escape tab ends ratio. So that's telling you the number of bugs that are occurring in production versus getting trapped in development or a test area. So it's important to track that. I mean, management wants to see, what's occurring, what isn't being done in development or testing that could be done. I mean, can we increase testing? Can we increase our unit testing to capture those bugs early in the life cycle? And some of them may be such unique use cases that they're going to occur anyway, something that nobody ever would have thought of testing. And to kind of highlight that, we do create another KPI or another metric called time to ab-end since compile. So this is the amount of time that has occurred, or the number of days that have occurred that on average that the bugs are occurring. So you can look at it in development and production. So, or both. And then in development, obviously, you want to see that as a low value. You want to fail fast. But in production, I would want to see that as a very high value so that it is leading to that theory that, boy, these are such unique use cases that, we never would have thought of testing that this is occurring.
I had a real life situation working with a client where we identified that they had over 800 events of the same type occurring in one day. Now, they weren't aware of this. And when we shared the metrics with them, they realized that these were end users or consumers you trying to use their services and failing. But as a consumer of a bank, you don't call the help desk and log a ticket. They just decide to try over and over again, using up more resources. But then they might ultimately decide to move to a different bank, for example. So it's important to make these visible so that the right people can take action based upon that. Because quite often, some of these escaped events are invisible to them.
Yeah, that's a great point, because if I go out to my mobile app for my bank and I go to look for the bank balance and it's not there, I just will come back, an hour later or the next day and check it at that point. And that might be some sort of event that's occurring or a bug that's occurring in production that's not necessarily getting to the level that people will go investigate it unless someone actually opens a help desk ticket.
So one of the things too with that is as DevOps increases speed, you have to maintain that quality. That's why this, quality is such a key metric to focus on, because it doesn't matter if you're pushing out solution after solution after solution as fast as you possibly can if your quality goes down to the point that Atul was just making.
Just to add to that, if I may, so our own experience as BMC CompuWare, when we started measuring our own quality levels, initially we identified we were spending so much more time fixing issues compared to working on innovation. And once these figures are visible to us, we can take proactive action to make sure that we can get on top of the actual originating source of these escaped events or escaped issues. And now we are spending up to 80% of our resources on innovation, delivering new capabilities. It's a massive difference compared to what we were doing 5 years ago. And we're seeing that trend in the industry as well now with these kind of metrics.
That's good. So the next KPI objective listed in the ebook is increased velocity or speed of development. What metrics can be used to gauge that? Spencer?
What we look at is our development productivity statistics, and this is captured from our SCM. So this is, we track how much time does it take you from checkout to do whatever you need to do with the code and then promote it to a testing level. And then how long does the code live at the testing level before getting promoted to production? So, those type of statistics give us insight into how long is it taking for the developer to develop the code, and then how long do, for lack of a better term, the back-end processes take at the testing level, or how much does the testing level take? We showed this to one of our customers, and he's like, wow, I never knew it took this long. My developers had kind of told me this in meetings that testing takes too long, but now I can see it's taking us 3 weeks. He goes, that's because we're manually testing and it's slowing them down. Whereas if they had more of an automated or unit testing approach, DevOps pipeline, they could go much faster and deliver better quality code.
So if I can add to that, again, a real life example. I was speaking to a customer probably about a month ago now, and they were telling me that they actually want their developers to manually go through their dumps that are created when a mainframe application bends. And this is in production. They do the same in development, but in production as well. And they say the reason they do that is because they want them to keep their skills sharp in how to debug, how to go through a dump itself. And also they do it for training purposes as well, to make sure people know how to do these things. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think a production environment is a place where people should be training or having fun going through dumps. It's where your business is running a real life application for your consumers. So we've got to make sure that we can actually repair the application as quickly as possible and get it back up and running in the quickest time frame possible. So this mean time to repair will expose those kinds of things behind the scenes where the technicians may be having fun looking at dumps, raw dumps, and manually going through those. And the people who are the stakeholders will understand this is not acceptable. We need to use automation where it's available to help us be far more effective in how we do things.
Yeah, to add on to what Atul was saying too, to add one more piece on that, to go back to the Dora metric stuff that I talked about a little bit ago. If you look at these metrics, everything that we're discussing really falls into these four categories. So the current one, deployment frequency and lead time for changes, directly measure speed. They measure efficiency. They measure how fast you're getting, your changes through the pipeline and deployed. And then just to go back to quality, the change failure rate is showing you how once you put things into production, are they sticking? What is your quality? Are you deploying and 50% of your changes are failing, or 75% of your changes are good, or 80 or 9? Hopefully you're in the 80s or 90s or somewhere high like that. But having these key KPIs that not just you're measuring, but as an industry standard that people are measuring, they lead to all these standards that we're trying to push.
And I think between them, we're already kind of dipping into the third KPI objective, which is the efficiency of the development team. What kind of metrics help determine the efficiency and whether or not there's any waste in the process? Atul, I'll ask you to start.
Yeah. So maybe if I could put some context around that first of all. So in the world of mainframe currently, we are seeing a move towards more and more of the veterans of the mainframe retiring, and the experience is walking out the door with them. So even though we can train up the new stewards, the millennials, for example, who are coming to take responsibility now, they will find things quite hard. And I'm a long-time advocate of making sure that if you have automation capabilities, tooling available to you, then we need to make sure that we're able to leverage those. And these will get us into a situation where we can actually differentiate with our competitors in the marketplace, because we have people who are far more productive and efficient in the way they do things, really. So we want to make sure we can get ideas into production as quickly as possible and make sure that anything that affects us in the service delivery itself is addressed. And this is where, again, I mentioned earlier, we do these exploratory discovery workshops with our clients. This really helps us to map out the process of delivery. And if there are bottlenecks in the way, we have to get those addressed. And also, I know how much time are we spending in the different stages of the life cycle, and where are we waiting? Where are we waiting for approvals, for example, or waiting for DBAs or some subject matter experts to step in and help us out? So lots of different areas to explore, and metrics play a vital part in that.
The fourth KPI objective listed in the Charting Your Mainframe Development KPIs ebook has to do with adoption, really. It's driving engagement. It's converting your developers into the DevOps culture, I guess would be the way to put it, in adopting tools.
In a transformation space too, this is such a key metric, because when we went through the transformation at my previous employer, having this ability to look at, where the adoption, where were those pockets of people that hadn't quite gotten on board or weren't using the new tools, it was essential, because then we knew where to focus our training, where to focus our attention, where to focus our evangelism, for lack of a better term, around this transformation process. On the distributed side of things, you have a lot of options, and you have, this is more the norm than the exception. But when you're transforming the mainframe, as Atul was talking about, as your older developers are retiring and moving on, and you're bringing in a newer generation, having this ability to look at who's adopting where, when, and how will give you that guideline about where to focus your attention in your transformation. And I know we found that key when we were doing it.
I know for system programmers, it's important for them to get people off old releases onto the new releases. So they really love being able to see what releases people are running of the different software and being able to unplug the old versions.
This ebook discusses the different types of employee engagement. And I think around 30% of employees are engaged. Typically, this is based on some research. 50% odd are unengaged. They'll show up, they'll do the work, and they'll go home. And about 15-16% of them are actually actively disengaged, and they will actually be working against the company in moving forward, in progressing. So I think these metrics will actually show these different levels of engagement. And what the company can do is be proactive in making sure nobody gets left behind. So if somebody doesn't quite understand whether it's a tool or a change in process, for example, we can support them actively to make sure that they are engaged and they don't feel left out. So this is more than just adopting a tool. It's about culture change within the organization as well. It's very important. And I think our end goal should be to build an army of passionate explorers. And if you look at some of the unicorns or the high performers, in industry, that's exactly what they've done with their workforce.
That's a great point, and I think probably a good place to end it for today. Atul, Tony, Spencer, thanks for joining me, and thank you to everyone listening. I'll include some links for further information in the show notes. Also be on the lookout for part 2 of our discussion of modern mainframe metrics and BMC Compuware Z Advisor. Until we talk to you then, take care. You're listening to the Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent Z optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues in the mainframe and how BMC AIME solutions can help you make change your competitive advantage.